what's up YouTube? I'm with Brian Clark. He made top 8 at YCS Philly, and we're going to be doing an updated deck profile from him since I couldn't get the deck last month. Yeah. Alright, go ahead.
Alright, so I played Hat. I'm still playing Hat. 3 moral techs. Some people play 2, but you just never want your Sanctums to be dead. And yeah. When I wasn't playing Ignition, it was more reasonable. 1 Beagle tech. This card sucks, but you want it to make drawn moral techs do something when you have Sanctum, etc. 3 Fire Hand, because people are bad at Yu-Gi-Oh! And it punishes them. And even when they're not bad at Yu-Gi-Oh! Sometimes you can't play around it. 3 Ice Hand for basically the same reason. Also makes your draw to 22, which is pretty awesome. 3 Murmillo. Some people play different ratios on this. I like 3 because you want to open this card to get bottomless. 1 Dionia. I know a lot of people play more than 1, but I play cars, so I need to cut. I might bring this up to 2. This card's like a better Wolfbark in this deck. You bring something back, pop something, overlay. It's really powerful. But drawing it when you don't draw Murmillo is pretty bad, so that's why I play 1. But it's not bad to play more than 1. 2 cars. This card, not everyone plays, but I think it's really good in the deck because if you open Sanctum, like that's basically a combo. Like the big drawback to the card is the tempo you lose by playing it. You're exchanging tempo for cards, and drawing Sanctum actually sort of negates that downside of it, meaning this can just be like draw 2, and it's like really ridiculous. It's just a good card overall, especially in decks like this. And it's another type for Dichotomy. 2 Upstart. This should obviously be 3 Upstart, but I'm testing something new in the deck, and I'm not sure what to cut yet. So in general, when you're testing like this, cutting an Upstart is fine because it has a very minimal impact on the game. So until you figure out what you really want to cut, you can just cut one of these for a while. But for any major event, you want to be prepared. You probably want to have 3 of this in your deck. I definitely will. 2 Dichotomy. Some people play Soul Charge, but Dichotomy can be live earlier than Soul Charge, and it doesn't require life, meaning it can potentially be live later than Soul Charge. And in games that go long, it's just really powerful. Drawing 2 cards is obviously ridiculous, but the fact that you're actually putting cards back in your deck is really good. Turning your dead Sanctums back on or turning your artifacts back on can be really nice. Also, recycling Dionia is also pretty cool. 3 Duality. You want to get to Sanctum in this deck, you want to get to card turn 1, you just want to get to Murmillo turn 1. There are a lot of stuff you want to get to turn 1. Obviously it doesn't have that much synergy with the hands, but like if your hands fail, you can activate this, and like say they have a bunch of back row, you can summon Ice Hand Attack, and they're not going to do anything to it, like Mirror Force. None of that card's really played. But then main phase 2, you can Duality. Be wary of dualitying with a hand on the field in the mirror though, because they can get you with Sanctum in the end phase, etc. Mind Control, because this card is just really good against Gears, which is this deck's first matchup. It's also good in the mirror. Just like a super powerful card. Gets rid of a hand for free. Gets rid of armor. You pretty much have to play it right now. 2 Ignition. I didn't play this card at Philly. I just played 3 Sanctum, 3 Moral Tech, but it's because like most of the people at the time were doing like 2 Beagle Tech, 3 Ignition. That seemed like way too much to me. Honestly, the idea of doing 2 and 1 on Beagle Tech and Ignition didn't even hit me. But these cards aren't that great, but they're good. Like drawing Moral Tech can be a problem for this deck, and this helps alleviate that. And if you're playing this card, you pretty much have to play Beagle Tech. It's sort of bad, but it's not super unreasonable to just play MSTs and no Beagle Tech, but I do think this is better. 3 Sanctum. Obviously, this is like the reason this is a deck. This card is super powerful, pop stuff, end phase. If your opponent MSTs and you chain it, you get both effects, which is just ridiculous. Pretty self-explanatory. 2 wiretaps. I might go up to 3. This card's super strong. Stops Sanctum without triggering its pop effect. Hits other wiretaps and 7 tools. Lets you force plays through. Because like otherwise it's really risky to make like rank 5s in this deck, but if you have wiretap down it can be a lot more reasonable, and Pallades is a really strong card. But overall this card's just really good right now. Could easily see myself going to 3. 2 Call. Call is incredibly powerful in this deck. It's good to call back hands. It's amazing to call back Murmillo and pop something. Amazing to call back Moral Tech and pop something. And actually Dionia's second effect that lets you set a trap hole, there are situations where you want to call that back and get bottomless back or something, so it is quite good. 2D prison. This could potentially change since the meta is shifting a bit more towards gears, but it's really good against the hands, and I mean, that's sort of it, but the hands are pretty big right now. It's a somewhat questionable card at this point, but for now I'm going to keep running it. Nightmare, Nightmare, and Bottomless. These are my two trapples. I know I run 3 Murmillo and only 2 trapples, but that's because this one, Bottomless, is the only really good one to get. This card's good, don't get me wrong, but if you search it off of Murmillo, it loses a lot of the value it has because your opponent knows that you have it, and it is a card that can be played around. Sometimes your opponent can't play around it, and it's good, especially to protect yourself from Excite Knight. That's one of the only reasons you'd ever search this over Bottomless, but it's a realistic thing. So yeah, I wouldn't run more than one of this, and I still want to open Murmillo, so I'm okay with running 3 and 2. Sometimes I have a dead Murmillo, but it's fine. Torrential, it destroys everything. Compulse. You can chain it with stuff to get, make Gigant miss timing. So it's like an overall good card. It helps you beat established field, something that hands already does, but if they play around it, like dragons could play around it by like making Drago sack in defense or something like that, and Compulse is just good at that. Warning, I know some people cut this from their decks, but if you do that, you're like not mentally sound, so don't do that. Like, you need to read this card again before you ever consider cutting it from a deck. It's sort of ridiculous. So that's the main deck. Extra deck. I used Emerald. This card's really relevant. Sends your hands back, turns your dead Sanctums back on, draws you a card. Pretty sweet. You don't make it like super often, but you don't really make any Exceed in this deck super often, but it is quite important for what it does. Ragna Zero. This card is really, really good. I'm sure everyone knows it, so applications and matchups like Boujins and Dolce, but another thing I want to bring up is there are times where you want to make this against Gear, because it gets over Gigant, but if you know they have Arsenal somehow and you're setting up like a field, or not even setting up a field, either way, this kills Arsenal and it draws you a card when Arsenal summons. So there are situations against Gears where you can make this card. It's pretty rare that you do that even against Gears, but it's something to keep in mind. Also, it's good against Tempo. Not that they're going to make that much against you, but Gear players, in the mirror, this card is good. Gear Mirror. Ladies, this is the rank 5 you make the most. It's really awesome. I mean, it basically has like a trap-like effect on a monster. Being able to interact on your opponent's turn is really awesome, and this is going to be your go-to rank 5 most of the time. It's just a really good card. Cowboy, I mean, he ends games, literally, that's what he does, it's his effect. Rhapsody and Berserk, the card's a bit weird, but the reason you make it is if your opponent, you can make it against dragons, but also if your opponent has breakthrough skills in the graveyard, and you're sitting on like calls, with Moral Text in the graveyard, you're sitting on Sanctums, you can make this and remove their breakthroughs to make your Sanctums and Moral Text live again, and that's a very real application. Dweller 2, because one of the few cards you want to make 2 of. Obligation is a lot of matchups against Mermails, against Dragons, even against Medolce and Sylvan. Card's really important. You're mostly running 2 for the Mermail matchup. That's the matchup where you're going to make 2 most of the time because it's just absolutely great against them. And because of Ice Hand, your drawers can actually be 22 in this deck, so it's pretty good. Zenmayo. Zenmayo's in this deck. He could be cut. The reason I have him in here is because, say your opponent has a lot of sets and you have Wiretap, like, the dream is to drop this and like wiretap their out and then pop stuff. Doesn't really come up that often, but the extra deck's not super tight in this deck, so I can see running it. Direwolf. Direwolf is one of the only ways to pop a face down armor with rank 4s without armor getting its effect. And there are just a lot of other weird scenarios you want to make it in. It just has a pretty unique effect as far as like utility goes, so that's why I play it. Cheerus. Make this against the hands mostly. It's another decent rank 5 if you don't want to make Pleiades, but you mostly want to make Pleiades. There are definitely spots where you make this instead, though. Good card. Black Ship of Corn gets rid of the hands, does 1,000. Gets rid of honors, does 1,000. Gets rid of some stuff in defense that like honors can't, and overall it's a good card. Good against Bujins, etc. It's good. Anti-Luminescent Knight. This card runs over Majesty's Fiend, and sometimes protects your stuff in weird scenarios. But yeah, it's in here. It's good against Majesty's Fiend. I would probably run the Love Chain instead of. Once I get a Love Chain, I'm gonna run that instead, because there are situations in this deck where you want to stack Dianea, and that's pretty good, so I'm probably gonna do that. Heartland Draco. This lets you go for game in certain spots. Really relevant after like a mid-play game soul charge where your opponent goes really low and sets up a big field. Depending on what they do, you can sometimes make Draco and just sort of steal the game, so it's pretty good there. Exciting Knight. He's a very exciting card. This card is ridiculous. It destroys everything on the field. Clearly, everyone knows what it does. It's amazing. You need to run him. Silent Honors Arc Knight. Very good. Pretty much has replaced Maestro in most extra decks, and for a good reason. This card is just a little absurd. You make it pretty often. It's good against Fire Hand, etc. This side's sort of shitty. You need to work on it a bit more from going forward, but it's alright. Acid Trap Hole. Gears is a tough matchup, and like a really tough matchup, and this card is the hardest card for them to play around. They can play around Nobleman, they can play around Nightmare, but it's pretty much impossible to play around that card. Neil Sealy, you get stupid people, and like, you know, some builds of Dolces pretty much have to summon a play into Needle Sealing to do their combos, and it can be good against Mermails. Any deck with Soul Charge, really, you side this in against Sullivan's as well. Anything you're afraid of just going on. Nobleman, still do side Nobleman, because it can't be wiretapped. Another one against Gears, and like I said, Gears is a bitch, so yeah. Debunk, side 3, for the Mirror, for Mermails, for Dragons. Other way around. For the Mirror, for Mermails, for Dragons. Good card, move stuff. Can be wiretapped, so some people are playing Skullmeister, but any trap can be a wiretap. That's really not very good logic. And Skullmeister's a lot worse against Mermails, so I think Debunk's probably best. Skullmeister also doesn't remove the cards. It is another target, another thing for Dichotomy, which is somewhat relevant, but you side out at least one of those a lot of the time anyway. Deep Dark Track Hole, it's searchable, it's against Sylvans, Dragons, Mermails to some extent, pretty good. One Maxi, this is obviously wrong, there should probably be 2, but for now, I just took Maxis out of my main deck, and this, like I said, this side is in a bit of a weird place, but yeah, you know what it does. It draws you cards against decks that need a special summon. Worth noting in this deck is against Maxi, is when you Maxi your opponent and they try to freeze. That can sometimes leave them open to the hand, so it gains a bit of value in this deck. It's just a good card overall. 3 MSTs. One of these should probably be an Ignition, since I'm now maining Ignitions, but so I'm probably going to work on that. But you side this in against like Gears and matchups that have floodgates that you need to get rid of. Like, I mean, Macro can be pretty annoying. Same thing with Soul Drain. So, I have MSTs in the deck. It's not particularly good in the mirror, but it can be. It's sort of odd, but yeah. BD Crow. This card's really good against Vidolce. It's good against some of the more pure artifact builds. I run a bunch of Ignitions and stuff. Overall, it's a pretty good card. It could be cut though. I mean, it's not very good against Gears. Might want more stuff against Gears, even more than I already have. So I'm not sure about that card going forward. Malevolent Catastrophe. Side this in against Gears. It's actually pretty good in the mirror. I know it triggers effects and stuff, but since it's going to be on your opponent's turn, not your turn most of the time, or all of the time, it won't trigger their moral text. It will trigger yours though. It can be like devastating for when they attack with Ice Hand into Maokai. You flip Maokai, get Mortal Attack pop like that. That can just win you games. This card is also surprising for some people, and you can get gear players with it sometimes. I'm not sure if I actually want to bring it in against gears, but I have been a while, and I mean it gets people. It's obviously a lot worse once your opponent sees it, and if your opponent sees it game 2, you usually side out on game 3. But yeah, so that's the deck. Side needs work. Extra needs a bit of work too, but overall I'm pretty happy with it. I might be testing a build of this deck without hands for ARG Philly, so maybe you'll see that if I do well with it, but I might stick to something like this, so yeah.
Any other comments?
This deck's good. Gears is a terrible matchup. I mean, it's winnable. I played it 4 times at Philly and I beat 3 of them, but I mean, not all my opponents were fully aware of what was going on, so. But they weren't even necessarily bad. The deck this hat deck was just really new to people. So yeah, I still think this is a pretty decent deck, but if everyone switches to gears, might need a lot of innovation to be correct going forward, but it's still a fairly strong pick.
Alright, thanks. Congrats.